everyone, Andrew here, and welcome to today's video, which is going to be all about unlicensed multi-carts, not just for the Nintendo Entertainment System, but also for the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, and even as new as the Nintendo DS. I just love, unofficial, unlicensed things like these. I have always made an effort to pick them up when I can, and usually, for a while there, it actually wasn't the easiest thing to come across. You'd have to get them from like swap meets and flea markets, maybe get lucky and come across them at the thrift store. eBay at one time wanted nothing to do with multi-carts. They saw it as, selling a copy of copyrighted material, and your listing would actually be taken down if you tried to sell a multi-cart on eBay. Now these days, you just go to eBay, search, NES multi-cart, and you'll get thousands upon thousands of results. People pump them out all the time now, so they've lost a little bit of their mystique, but I have a really big, soft spot in my heart for the more retro multi-carts like these back in the day, pumped out of places like Taiwan, and, actually out for sale at the time that the NES was a thriving thing. Of course, these days, you can just, get yourself an EverDrive, a flashcart, not have to worry about multi-carts anymore, and, I own most of the games pretty much that you can find on multi-carts anyway, but I just still think that they are such a neat piece of Nintendo history, especially since if you look at Nintendo Power issue 21 from February 1991, hilariously, the issue that has Star Tropics on the front, at the very back, there is actually a blurb here about Mario needs your help to stamp out fraud, and they want you to, if you see multi-carts for sale at stores or, in magazines, newspapers, whatever, to actually let Nintendo know about them so that they can crack down on these guys. And I believe that because of this, they actually did, and there was a later issue of Nintendo Power as well, where they're like, thanks to your help, we cracked down on them and stuff, and but obviously, people still continue to pump them out, because there's a few here that definitely seem to go into the 92s, 93s, and I mean, obviously beyond the NES as well, multi-carts continued to exist. But without further ado, let us actually look into them here, starting with the NES, because you kind of have to. These are all the different NES multi-carts that I own, starting from least number of games to most number of games, although one thing to definitely note is that if something says it has a certain number of games on it, it is not guaranteed that when you play it, it will actually have that many different games. Sometimes, it'll just be the same game repeated a bunch of times, and we will definitely look more into some of these in this video. I will splice in clips of some of the multi-carts, and throughout the month, I also plan to actually look at some multi-carts individually, just for the fun of it. But starting off with the most basic one I have is 31 in 1. And going to the back here, actually I should note, I like when multi-carts on the top, put what it actually is, so it looks a little nice at least, on the shelf beside the rest of your games. And on the back, we actually get a list of the different games that are available on it. And you'll notice probably Mary 2 and Mary 1. Well, that's kind of strange. I've never heard of an NES game called that. What they actually mean is Mary 2 is Super Mario Brothers, while Mary 1 is the Mario Bros. Arcade game. So they definitely tried to tiptoe around the whole legality aspect of it. They were very obviously, selling things that they did not own, but they didn't want to be too blatant about it, I guess. Other things like, Iceman is actually Ice Climber. It's not, the Iceman level from Mega Man 1. Balloon is Balloon Fight. And you just get all sorts of neat and bizarre things like that when it comes to these multi-carts. Another thing that's kind of funny about some of them is that they for some reason use the Famicom Disk System startup screen for their menus, and you get two guys along the bottom that are supposed to be Mario and Luigi, but they've been redesigned to look like clowns or something like that. I don't know. I'm not sure what inspired them to do that, but overall, I just think it's really neat. And as you can tell, the cartridge design too is, pretty bizarre. Doesn't really look like an official NES cartridge aside from, the general shape, but we will see some variety in that as we go on as well. Here, we have 76 in 1, and once again, we get a list of games on the back, except for some reason you get this really nice spot here to place the sticker of what games are included, and they decide to, place it above that. No idea, but once again, you're getting some very basic games, just like with 31 in 1. 76 in 1 has Mario Brothers on it, but also features a lot of the NES black box titles, the titles that the NES launched with, like Ice Climber and Tennis and all that jazz. The funny thing about Mario Brothers on this one is that they changed the Mario at the top left corner of the screen where, you know, it's usually on top of the score, they take away the O, so it's not Mario. They're not breaking any kind of copyright infringement. It's the totally original character, Mari. And Toad no longer thanks you, you know, so it doesn't say thank you, Mario, when you beat a world. It just says thank you, you know, so it's definitely not Mario, guys. Definitely not copyright infringement, but otherwise, pretty much the same design. Actually, a little bit of a different design than the other one, but overall, still a pretty funky looking cart. The next one, though, definitely changes that up when we get to 110 games in one. And I love this design because they definitely tried to mimic an official NES cart. You got those, you know, lines going down the side. Of course, the color is a little bit different, but even the really nice label, I love that it lists all the games on the front there. Even goes all the way to the top, so it looks absolutely beautiful sitting on your shelf. And if we turn to the back, there's even actually some, you know, custom design going on here. They've engraved the name of the company in Taiwan that was pumping these out. Like, they were proud that they were, you know, counterfeiting Nintendo games, that they actually, you know, called themselves a certain thing, in this case, Supervision. And it says made in Japan, but, you know, I guess it's supposed to trick you. Some people probably believed it. Again, though, you're just pretty much taking the 76 in one, adding maybe a couple more games, but for the most part, it's just, you know, they're repeating some of the same games in the list more than once, so it looks like it's more games than it actually is. One of the funny things about the 110 in one is that the Super Mario Brothers on there is actually a hack that takes the Super Mario Brothers 2 Japan foreground graphics and puts them in Mario Brothers 1. So, you know, if you're looking for something funky like that, I guess, you know, it may be worth your while to pick up 110 games one, but I just like the look of this cart a lot. It looks official. Like, you could almost, you could probably convince someone that this was like a real official Nintendo thing if you really wanted to. Not sure why you would. But yeah, you definitely could do that. I'm also not talking about things like Action 52 in this video, which again is obviously, you know, something was not licensed by Nintendo, but was a multi-cart release for the NES. I'm just mainly in this video focusing on multi-carts that include, you know, illegal copies of Nintendo's own games, not 52 absolutely terrible games as was made by, you know, Action 52 guys. This once again, though, is actually the exact same 110 in one cartridge. As you will see, the sticker on the back actually lists the exact same games, but for whatever reason, it's just in a different shell now. So I guess, you know, not made by the same guys, or made for them before they, you know, got super professional and, you know, came with a nice cart design. But this design follows, obviously, the look of the 76 in one and the 31 in one from earlier. And again, same games, but different looks, so definitely had to grab that for my collection. Next up, though, we are looking at 190 in one, and we're getting pretty high up there now. I am definitely going to make a video of playing 190 in one, because I think it's kind of cool some of the things that this cart does. It definitely does not have 190 unique games on it, but instead it has about 100 unique games, or maybe that might even be a little bit generous. And then, yeah, I think that's that's a little bit too generous. It has a lot of unique games, more than, you know, the previous ones for sure. But after you get past the 100 mark, it's the games from, you know, the first 100, yet you can add cheats to them. So, you know, by being able to add cheats, they consider that an all-new game for some reason. We're going to look into that one more for sure. Expect to see some gameplay of this on my channel in the near future. And also a second copy of it that actually looks a little bit different. Once again, with that nice, you know, kind of cartridge design that actually mimics what a real NES cartridge would look like, with those lines down the side and all that jazz. Definitely a fan of this one. More than I am the other one. Next up, though, jumping from 190 all the way up to 250. I hate when they put the label upside down, though. I guess that's because when you put it into your NES, you know, the good old one we have to push down, you would be looking at it like this, and, you know, from the front you would see the name, but it's not like it really mattered. It doesn't look any good when it's sitting on a shelf like this. But yes, the golden 250 is actually a multi-cart I used to see all over the place, not so much these days. It comes in a few different colors. I've seen it with like a dark blue navy or like a black outside case as well. This is the gray variation. No indication at all on here what games are on it. Instead, on the back, you actually get, you know, a nice kind message so that you don't go end up, you know, dunking it in the pool or something like that, and then not able to play it. Unfortunately, the games on this one are not very good. In fact, I think I would prefer the 190 in one over the golden 250, so you know, don't spend too much money on this. What you used to see back in the day was people who you know, sometimes at swap meets, usually at flea markets, people who didn't know any better, they'd have like 110 in one, and they would say, well, you know, 110 games, you know, $1 each, so I'm going to charge $110 for it, and, you know, you can't do that. Especially, you know, first of all, there's not actually 110 unique games on it, and I don't think anyone in the history of the world has ever paid, you know, such a high price. Action 52 tried to do that, you know, pay like $250 or whatever I think it was, and, you know, that one didn't go so well either. I usually see multi-carts going around for, you know, 20-ish, maybe 40 on the high end, but I would not pay more than that for an NES multi-cart. Next up, though, is probably one of my best NES multi-carts, and that is the 350 in one. And it's funny, it says 1992 on here, so you know we're getting a little bit newer. I would assume that maybe, like, the 31s and ones, those are probably, you know, if not late 80s, definitely, you know, early 90s, but maybe even late 80s, where by this point, there's a lot more games out now, and the pictures on the front actually don't lie. You will find Contra on here. You will find Castlevania 1 on here. You will find Adventure Island on here. So this is not the worst multi-cart out there. However, you're definitely not finding 350 unique games on it, and also it is a little of a lighter color compared to the other ones, which is cool. But otherwise, you actually do on the back, once again, get a list of everything on there. And it says, you know, at the bottom, Nintendo patent pending, made in Japan. Probably not the case. And it's funny because this is actually even the newer NES cart design, unlike the other carts we've looked at so far, that even though they mimicked it, they do have the, you know, good old 5-screw NES case, where this one tried, you know, its best to look like a new game. Unfortunately, though, as nice as it is, no label on the end, so you have to, you know, take it off the shelf to know exactly what you're looking at, but still pretty cool. And last but not least for the NES, if we're not including Famicom anyway, is the Entertainment Computer System. It doesn't even say on the front what it is, with some kind of character that if anyone knows who that is, please let me know. But if we flip it to the back, there, it is revealed that we are actually looking at, it is right side up, I couldn't tell in the picture, a 370 and 1. I don't know if that's like some, you know, school project or, you know, art that their 5-year-old child drew or something like that, and they plastered it on the back of the cartridge. But this is a weird one, and no indication anywhere of, you know, what games are actually on it. It's even a little bit broken, unfortunately, but it still does work if you get it into your console right. You just might, you know, never actually get it out. And the game selection on this is actually worse than on the 350 in one. So if you see this really bizarre thing somewhere, don't pay too much for it, because it doesn't actually have that good of a variety of games. So, just all that is the NES games, and I want to do a quick look through now of my Famicom ones, where there actually are some repeats if I grab these here. But there are some definitely interesting things to look at here as well. I showed this way back when we looked at my other multi-carts, you know, way back in 2012, and this is so neat. I should note, I mean, it's probably a given, that when you play any of these other multi-carts, when you turn them on, you are met with a menu that will allow you to choose, you know, one of the 190 games or so forth that you want to play. But I don't know if this is just, you know, predates all of those by a million years or something, but it actually does not have a menu when you turn it on. Instead, there are 2 switches on front, and this is actually a 4-in-1 multi-cart. So depending on the position of the switches, whether they are to the left or to the right, it will determine what game you get when you, you know, when you turn on the console. So both to the left will be one game, one to the left and one to the right will be another game. So it's actually kind of neat that, you know, it's like a mystery. You have to, you know, try it for yourself to figure out just which game you're going to get. Because the back doesn't help you at all. It is just in Japanese, you know, kind of that, you know, typical warning that you get on the back of your games, not to take it apart, not to dunk it in water and all that sort of jazz. I've just always been really fascinated by this one because, you know, it's just so different from other multi-carts that I own. Another one here for the Famicom, another 4-in-1, pretty much the same as the last one that we viewed, just instead, you know, with more newer technology, actually has a menu this time. Next up, 52-in-1. Definitely fills that gap between, you know, the 31-in-1 and the 76-in-1. Just now we are talking, you know, 52, and as you can see, it's pretty much the same games as those other multi-carts, just in this case, it's a Famicom one. Actually, here we have 31-in-1, exactly the same as the NES 31-in-1, except for the Famicom. Once again, a 110-in-1 for the Famicom, but again, exactly the same as the 110-in-1 for the NES. Here we have 1201 with nothing on the back of this one. And this one isn't the best multi-cart. It's kind of lying about what's actually on it. On the front there, like, I don't believe it has Super Mario Bros. 3, so never again, you know, go by just what the pictures on the front of a multi-cart show. You're likely to be deceived if you do such a thing, but still a cool multi-cart to own nonetheless. And here, we're getting into the you know, the big leagues now. 9,999,999 games in one, including baseball, Super Mario, clay shooting, duck hunt, Olympic 2008, and jewelry. What this is it's actually track and field, but they just copied the games like a million times. You know, they took the game track and field, separated each of the different events from it, and then, you know, just made a gigantic list out of them, and I think also included Mario. So it's definitely not as it advertises, but, you know, not to be, you know, one-upped. We then have 10,000,001. Which is essentially the exact same thing with maybe a couple other games thrown in, but it definitely doesn't have 10 million unique games. It's just the same thing repeated over and over again. And the final thing I have to show in terms of the NES is the Super Game and Keyboard, which I played way back. And the really neat thing about this is it has Super Mario Bros. On it, but you can cheat at the title screen to select any world you want right from the get-go. I'm not just talking about worlds 1 through 8. But also past 8, so World 9, World A, all the way up to World Z, and then past World Z, and you start getting into, you know, like garbled graphics worlds. And I've made videos about that I will link to. A little bit old at this point, maybe we'll look at it again. But it's really neat seeing some really bizarre stuff in Super Mario Bros. You have never seen before, because, you know, the rules just do not exist. I think it also has some games like Conte and stuff, so not a bad multi-cart, but definitely a weird one to be sure. So with all that said, that is just my NES multi-carts, although there's definitely not as many multi-carts for other consoles out there as we're about to see. Lots of Game Boy. But I think before we get to Game Boy, let us do the one Super Nintendo multi-cart that I own, and that is the Super Nintendo 4X1, 4-in-1, including such great games as Super Mario World, Gradius 3, Smash TV, and Super Tennis. It's interesting that it says Super Nintendo 4-in-1, considering it's actually like a hacked together Super Famicom cart. This will not fit into your Super Nintendo without some sort of adapter, or unless you've broken the tabs out of the inside of your SNES to allow, you know, games from any region to be played in it. Because of course for Super Nintendo, you have to have those two gaps in the back of the cartridge in order for it to fit in properly. However, it is exactly as it advertises. You can play all these games on there, except I do not believe that there's a battery in it, or if there is, it died long ago. So you're gonna have to play Super Mario Brothers, all of it, in just one sitting, which, I mean, it's not too hard to do, especially if you don't do all 96 exits, but even if you do, not the longest game in the world, but it's just cool. You don't see too many Super Nintendo multi-carts, especially compared to, you know, how many NES ones there ended up being. It just, you know, kind of went overboard, especially, you know, it's not even like the NES didn't have any kind of, you know, lockout protection. It did, and just these guys kept finding ways to break it. So I guess maybe it was probably a little harder to work around that on the Super Nintendo, where you do see like Super 3D Noah's Ark on there, but even to play that you had to put, you know, an official game on top of it so it could use that to, you know, trick the lockout chip. I just find unofficial things so fascinating. I hope that you are all enjoying seeing this. Next up though, let us jump into the Game Boy, where we have Super 19-in-1. And the funny thing is that this is actually a slightly newer multi-cart. As you can see on here, it says compatible with Game Boy Color / Game Boy Advance / Game Boy Advance SP. So yeah, definitely came out in the later days of the Game Boy Color. It even includes some things, you know, like the Conquer game and such. Not a bad multi-cart, but, you know, it has 19 games and they're not too great. You can definitely, you know, do better. One of my favorite Game Boy multi-carts, though, is this one, the Game 12-and-1. And like this Famicom multi-cart, it does not have a menu when you turn on the game. Instead, when you turn on the game, you will always get Battle City, as is listed on the top there. If you want to switch through the different games, you have to press this white button on the top of the cartridge, which resets the Game Boy, and then brings up the next game in the list. So if you look, Super Mario Land is actually the lowest game on the list at 12. So if you want to play Mario Land, you turn on your Game Boy, it boots up Battle City, you need to press this button 11 times to reset the Game Boy 11 times before you can finally start playing Super Mario Land. It's definitely, bizarre, and again, it's just a type of multi-cart that you don't commonly see. So I thought that was really neat when I found it. Other Game Boy multi-carts that I own are much simpler, and they are all, actually I probably won't take them all out of the case because they're all kind of the same. And they are just, your typical multi-carts, like 38 in 1, 36 in 1. I might show a couple of these on video. One of them actually has a very interesting hack of Super Mario Land, which I think people might be interested in seeing, but there's just, a lot of Game Boy multi-carts out there as well. I've definitely noticed that Game Boy and NES are the two consoles that seem to, have really gone wild with the piracy for whatever reason. Moving on though, we actually have some Sega Genesis, the 7-in-1, and what's really cool about this multi-cart is that it includes Tetris, a lost Sega Genesis game for a very long time that was very hard, to play on official console because it never had an official release. Now with the Sega Genesis Mini that was released not too long ago, it was actually included in that, so it's much easier to play these days. But otherwise, I was actually able to, play Tetris on the Sega Genesis quite easily for a long time before many other people had access to it. And if we open this up here, as you can see, I don't know why they decided that, Flintstones had to be what was on the front of the cartridge, but it does say Super New 7-in-1. And once again, this multi-cart does not have a menu when you turn it on. It will always bring up the Flintstones at first, and you actually have to press reset on the console a certain number of times until it loads up whichever game it is that you want to play. I mean, definitely a pretty good way of getting around having to program a menu and such. So I think that's really fascinating, and you don't see many Sega Genesis multi-carts aside from, like, Action 52 and stuff. So when I found this at a thrift store, I jumped on it right away. Next up, we actually have a Game Boy Advance multi-cart. We are definitely going to be playing this one on my channel. It even includes a box, which is pretty cool. The 148-in-1. And yeah, on the front there, you got a whole bunch of games. The whole, Mega Man Battle Network 4 going on there. Some Mario Advance, it looks like. But if we look at the back, you should notice something very peculiar about the list of games. I'm not going to mention what it is at this point, but see if you can figure out why. There's something a little bit strange about just what games it's listing are on a Game Boy Advance multi-cart. I will open up the box here for you though. We can have a little bit of a closer look at the cartridge inside. It even has, the cardboard in there to hold the cartridge in properly, which is very nice. And pulling the cartridge out here, this is what 148 games in one looks like. And as I said, we're definitely going to be playing this on my channel, so expect to see more about that soon. And the final multi-cart that I have to show all of you today, as promised, there is actually a Nintendo DS multi-cart, and that is the Nintendo DS 7-in-1, including such games as Mario Kart DS, New Super Mario Bros., Pokemon Diamond and Pearl Mystery Dungeon, and, the very popular Cake Mania and Kim Possible, just to round things off. I'm surprised they didn't think that those games might be a bit too good and, overshadow the other ones, but they are on there as well. And I actually went on a cruise around 2006, 2007, where, what's it called? When I went to one of the Caribbean islands and we stopped there, we went into an electronics store, they had a glass case just full of bootleg Nintendo DS games that looked exactly like this one. I did not buy any of those, but then years later, I came across this cartridge and had to pick it up because it totally reminded me of that. And, 7-in-1, you don't really get anything inside here other than that. But yeah, obviously these were sold, flea markets, random countries and islands in the middle of who knows where, and it actually works. It does actually have the games that it says on there. It's not lying. It's pretty much just a Nintendo DS flash cart that cannot be, added to or modified in any way, but only has those 7 games on it. and it's just, you know, a bizarre experience for sure. You wouldn't think that, you know, even up to the Nintendo DS there would be a Multicart still, but considering, you know, how flashcarts kind of took over that console, I guess it's not the most, you know, surprising thing. But for the most part these days, you don't see multicarts for modern consoles anymore. You definitely don't see like a Nintendo Switch multicart, a PlayStation 3 or 4 disc that has like 100 games on it. It's definitely faded out. If you want to get a game, you can probably find it somewhere, you know, and you know, get it that way if you don't feel like buying it legitimately. But there will always be a special place in my heart for, you know, just really random things like this. Like, what is this? I don't know, but I love it, and I think it is so cool. So I hope that you enjoyed seeing my retro multi-cart collection, as I said, all throughout this month, and, you know, who knows when, just if I ever feel like playing one, we're going to be checking them out, and I hope that you enjoy. Looking forward to that. If you have any comments about any of these, have any more, like, you know, stories, maybe you owned one, maybe you know the origins of some of them, please feel free to comment down below. But otherwise, thanks so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and hope to see you next time for something different. So thanks, and see you later.